Hey everybody. So defenseman Brent Seabrook was healthy scratched by the Chicago Blackhawks last night, and trade rumors are starting to swirl around Seabrook and the Blackhawks. Before we get into the video, I just want to quickly remind everyone to please hit that like button and give this video a thumbs up, so that greatly helps out the channel. And if you're not yet subscribed, please hit that subscribe button and follow along for all my hockey content this season. So Brent Seabrook, obviously, at one point was one of the better defensive defensemen in the NHL, made up part of when Chicago was winning Stanley Cups in the early part of this decade. He and Duncan Keith were a dynamic duo on the back end for the Blackhawks. And, you know, Seabrook was widely regarded as this great defensive defenseman. Recently, however, the past few years we've seen significant decline in Brent Seabrook's play. He's now 34 years old, and he still has 4 more years beyond this season at just under $7 million per year on his contract. He makes $6.875 per season, and this is starting to look like a really, really bad contract for the Chicago Blackhawks that they need to get rid of. Seabrook, this season, has played 9 games. He has 1 goal, his only point on the season, and he is -5 already. It's really been a gradual decline for Seabrook. He actually had his career high in points in the 2015-16 season, where he had 49 points for the Blackhawks. It's been all downhill from there, as 2016-2017, he dropped down to 39 points, which still not a bad season at all. And then we really started to see things change. And in 2017-2018, he only had 26 points and was -3, one of his only minus seasons in his career. And then last year, he only had 28 points and was -6. And like I said, so far this season, he only has 1 point and is -5. And the Blackhawks are a team that is right up against the salary cap. They are really, really close with money. And having a player tied up for 4 more seasons beyond this year at almost $7 million per year that they are healthy scratching is going to be a money problem for Chicago. And I think that's one of the main reasons that these rumors are really starting to swirl, because Chicago needs to move this contract. There have been a lot of things I've read about Seabrook and where he could end up. There really aren't many teams in the league that could take on the Seabrook contract without dumping salary of their own. Really, the only 3 teams that have enough cap space right now to take on almost $7 million and not go over the cap are the Ottawa Senators, Colorado Avalanche, and Columbus Blue Jackets. So obviously, when it comes to money, those 3 stand out because financially they could do it. So could Brent Seabrook possibly get traded to any of those 3 teams? Well, the Ottawa Senators obviously are in a rebuild. They've already got a lot of contracts on their hands of players who were salary dumps. And they've been a team that over the past number of seasons, or past couple years, that since they've really been bad and gone into rebuild mode, has been willing to take on bad contracts and take players off the hands of other temes. So Ottawa certainly could be a possibility for Seabrook. Colorado is an interesting one. Colorado is already pretty deep at defense. They've got the cap space, but I really don't see them taking on that contract. Mostly because Colorado is a team that is on the rise, on the significant rise, even just from last year to this year. They need to, they have more players to sign going forward, younger guys to sign going forward. They are a contending team. They are not going to take on a bad contract just for the heck of it. So I would say Colorado is out as far as a trade partner. They're not going to want anything to do with a declining 34-year-old defenseman taking up almost the rest of their salary cap space. And the Columbus Blue Jackets, I think, are an interesting option here, because Columbus is playing better this year than I expected them to, and I think that a lot of people expected them to. They have over $8.5 million in salary cap space. So they could potentially try and improve their defense by adding Brent Seabrook, although would Brent Seabrook be an improvement, I guess, is a major question there. But their problem is they have a number of RFAs coming up, including Josh Anderson, who's going to be due for a significant raise, and Pierre-Luc Dubois also going to be due for a significant raise. So, I don't really see Columbus, unless they were able to dump some money of their own and maybe move on from maybe like a Riley Nash or a player like that, and maybe dump some of that money of their own. But Seabrook in Columbus would be interesting because obviously Columbus's top pair, Seth Jones and Zach Werenski, are, the guys. So the pressure would be off Seabrook. He would not have to be a top pair guy. Really, he may not even have to be a second pair guy in Columbus with David Savard and Marcus Nudevar and Ryan Murray when he's healthy, potentially taking spots there. Seabrook could go to Columbus, kind of play in a pressure off bottom pair role. Obviously, you don't want to be paying a bottom pair defenseman as much money as Seabrook makes, but he could potentially make their Columbus defense a little bit better if he can kind of get his game together and at least, become a passable defensive defenseman again. Maybe the offense may never be there again. He may never put up points again, significant points again, but at least get his game to the point where he does contribute to the lineup and he is worth playing and not sitting out. He could potentially make Columbus better, and they do right now have the cap space to do it. So that would be an interesting thing, although I really don't see that happening. Ottawa, I'm going back to the Senators. Ottawa really sticks out because another option here is a bad contract for bad contract trade, similar to what Calgary and Edmonton pulled off with the Lucic for Neil swap this past summer. And I think this is much more likely to happen than just a team taking on that contract. If you're going to take on this Seabrook contract, you're going to want to get rid of a bad contract of your own. And looking on Wheelhouse Hockey's Facebook page, one of the many hockey Facebook pages I follow this morning, they had an interesting, a couple of interesting possibilities for where Seabrook could end up. One is Vancouver. Now, Vancouver has added to their defense a lot this past offseason, bringing in Tyler Myers, bringing in Jordy Ben, bringing in Oscar Fantenberg as a depth guy. Could they look to add another defenseman and bring in Brent Seabrook while sending the Louis Eriksson contract over to Chicago? Because Eriksson still has multiple years remaining on his deal at $6 million per year. So the money wouldn't exactly cancel out, but it would be a good chunk of it would cancel out. Eriksson would go to Chicago, where he would probably play a bottom six role and just be looked at as a secondary scorer, because he obviously has not lived up to his contract with the Canucks. And then Seabrook would go to Vancouver, where again he would probably play in a bottom pair role there in Vancouver. That the pressure would be off, and he could just focus on getting his game back together and contributing to the lineup in a minimal role. Another option, back to Ottawa, is Bobby Ryan for Brent Seabrook. Bobby Ryan has a number of years left on his contract at $7.25 million per year. Obviously, he has not been that kind of player for the Senators, and probably will never be worth that again. He's a guy whose career has really gone downhill over the past few years, and that would be a bad contract for bad contract move. The money obviously would shift a little bit in favor of in favor of Ottawa. Ottawa may have to retain some of Ryan's salary in that case. But Bobby Ryan, I think, would be an interesting guy to add to Chicago because, again, Chicago's got a pretty talented lineup. They're not off to a great start, but they've got some good players in that lineup. Ryan would not be looked upon to be a top-level scorer the way he was in Ottawa when he got sent to the Senators. He, again, would probably play like a third-line-ish role with Ottawa or with Chicago and be looked at as a secondary scorer, and that would be a really bad contract swap there, or bad contract for bad contract swap. And then Seabrook would end up in Ottawa, where, again, they're not expected to do anything. He'd probably play a pretty high role in the Senators' defense, given what their roster looks like. But, that's an interesting possibility. There are a number of possibilities in where Brent Seabrook could go. We've seen with the Lucic and Neal trade that a bad contract for bad contract deal is possible to make in the NHL, and that teams will listen to these offers. And with Seabrook being healthy, scratched, and playing the way that he's playing, I gotta think that Chicago wants to get rid of this contract because he is making a ton of money. They are right up against the cap. They need that money off the books. And they're a team that, again, I think is kind of on the rise. They've had a couple of rough seasons. They've gone through a rebuild. They've added some really good young talent. Now they want to start going the other way again, start competing for a playoff spot. They need the cap space to add to this team and make this team better. They can't be paying a healthy scratch defenseman almost $7 million a year. So while these are just trade rumors, I 100% believe that Chicago is very interested in moving this Brent Seabrook contract and moving on from him as a player. The question is there a partner out there? Is there a trade partner out there who wants to take this contract on? I don't think anyone is just going to be like, oh, give me that contract, I'll take it. Chicago is probably going to have to take a bad contract in return. Just hope that they end up a little bit on the better side as far as the money goes. So again, I think a deal for Louis Eriksson would save them about $800,000 per season. A deal for Bobby Ryan, I think they would ask Ottawa to retain salary in that situation to kind of even the money out. But I think Bobby Ryan as a player would be a more interesting add to Chicago's lineup. He's somebody that I think could possibly contribute for them and actually add to that lineup and make that team a little bit better in a secondary scoring role. So that would come into play there. Columbus, again, I don't necessarily see Columbus wanting to take on this contract, but if they see Seabrook as somebody who kind of come in, be a bottomish pair, fourth or fifth defenseman, good defensive guy, veteran guy, leader, kind of come in and stabilize that defense a little bit, then maybe Columbus, they have the cap space to do it, could make a move like that. So, it's an interesting situation to watch. It's definitely something to keep an eye on because I obviously think that the Blackhawks are interested in getting Seabrook out of there. It's going to be all about, is there a suitable deal for both sides on the table, and who is the partner going to be? Because salary cap wise, I don't think there are a lot of teams that are going to be interested in adding Brent Seabrook, not at that cap hit for that many more years, and the decline that we've seen in him the past 2 or 3 seasons has been significant. So, we'll see what happens. Obviously it's the NHL, anything is possible, but I think if a deal does get done, it's going to have to involve the swapping of bad contracts back and forth and trying to get something done that way. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.